This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. She died waiting for heart surgery. Her family is blaming what they say is a flawed healthcare system that left their loved one sitting on a waiting list instead of getting the life-saving care she needed. CBC's Mike Arsenault explains.
We are left with the devastating loss of our mother, our rock.
Daniel Fuster lost his 69-year-old mother, Debbie Fuster, last October. She was settling into retirement, very involved in her community, and led an active life. Last August, she found out she needed triple bypass heart surgery.
After a Thanksgiving dinner with our family, she was gone. My mom passed away before the surgery ever happened.
Debbie was on a wait list for her heart surgery. The family was told she required surgery within 3 weeks of her diagnosis, but after months of waiting and no firm surgery date, she passed away. Now the Fuster family wants more transparency. They shared their story with secondcity.org, a public policy think tank. Colin Craig is the president.
What we're really focused in on today is cases where a patient is told they need care in a recommended time frame, and the health system knows that it cannot provide treatment within that time frame.
Second Street and the Fuster family are proposing Debbie's Law. It would require healthcare authorities to let patients know if wait times will be longer than recommended for the patient. Colleen Dick is Fuster's daughter.
Debbie's Law won't fix everything, but it will introduce something that is desperately needed, and that's radical honesty. At the very least, our healthcare regions should track deaths on waiting lists relentlessly.
Debbie's Law would also require Manitoba Health to post statistics showing how many people died while waiting for surgery and how many of them were waiting longer than recommended. Health Minister Uzoma Azaguara offered their condolences to the Fuster family for their loss and say they don't want to see anyone pass away while waiting for care in Manitoba.
I certainly am very open to looking at what the proposed law is, and I'm very open to always hearing ideas from Manitobans about how we can make healthcare stronger.
The Fuster family hopes Debbie's Law encourages more honesty in healthcare.
If this saves one life, dude, that's huge for us. My mom would have wanted that.
Azaguara says the province is working to restore the Cardiac Center of Excellence at St. Boniface Hospital. Mike Arsenault, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Canada is hitting the U.S. with tariffs on $29.8 billion worth of goods after President Donald Trump slapped a 25% levy on steel and aluminum imposed at midnight Tuesday. Now, the countermeasures will target $12.6 billion in U.S. steel products and $3 billion in aluminum. In addition, Ottawa is hitting another $14.2 billion worth of American goods with fresh levies. Those will take effect early tomorrow morning. Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc says Trump's attack on Canadian industry is unjustified and unjustifiable. The countermeasures come as LeBlanc and Ontario Premier Doug Ford are set to meet with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick in Washington tomorrow. The tariffs have Canadian businesses bracing for impact. That includes people here in Manitoba. The CBC's Alana Cole got inside a specialized plant selling to the U.S.
At Hunter Wire, this machine, custom. The measurements precise.
But every rink is unique. Right. Every engineer is unique.
These are ice rink pipe chairs made of steel wire. They support rebar and refrigeration pipes in ice rinks. Hunter Wire supplies them to between 150 to 200 North American arenas a year. 30% of those in the U.S. That means tariffs.
I have one customer in New York that is just almost, I would say, apoplectic. He can hardly talk about it. He's so upset.
Rick Koss says they've been making the product for decades, from NHL arenas to curling rinks. Now, customers south of the border are going to have to pay more.
They can't just go to Bob's Welding down the street and say, hey, can you make this for us? Because they can't. We have very specialized machinery to produce this product.
President Donald Trump's threats of 25% tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum became reality today. Canada has announced more counter tariffs on American goods, including U.S.-made steel and aluminum, sports equipment, and computers. The Foreign Affairs Minister called out Trump's reason for these tariffs and others looming.
The only constant in this unjustified and unjustifiable trade war seems to be President Trump's talks of annexing our country through economic coercion.
Jolie says Canadians have made it clear they won't back down. Koss agrees with that message.
Canada has to stand strong, stay strong, and push back.
Koss says he hasn't had orders for the ice rink parts canceled. The company sells other products to the U.S. too. He says tariffs lead to questions about what's in store for future projects. Alana Cole, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Police say more than a dozen people were involved in a multi-province drug trafficking network that was targeting vulnerable northern communities here in Manitoba. The illicit drugs were moved by mail, plane, train, boat, and car in moves that took months of tracking. CBC's Zubina Ahmed has more.
Drugs, cocaine, cash, loaded guns, and bullets. This is what was seized by the Winnipeg Police Service's Organized Crime Unit as part of their Project Low-Key. Inspector Josh Iwatsky says the drugs were transported from Toronto to Manitoba and then funneled to northern communities.
Organized crime members from Ontario and Toronto are coming here because they know that they can come into these communities who are vulnerable in many ways and prey off their vulnerabilities. And their sole purpose there is to make money off these people.
Manitoba First Nations Police Inspector Derek Beach was part of the investigation. He says it is fairly common for drugs to come into their communities.
We believe that Sandy Bay was a hub where the drugs were broken down and then subsequently traveling up north to other First Nation communities and other smaller northern communities in Manitoba.
Inspector Iwatsky says the individuals used hotels and Airbnbs to carry out their drug network and traveled across provinces using modified vehicles with fraudulent identification and documents.
Such as driver's licenses from multiple provinces, social insurance numbers to travel on commercial airlines and railways. They also used fraudulent identification to open bank accounts throughout Canada so as to be able to access the money to fund their operations.
Police says 11 properties in Winnipeg, Sandy Bay, Saskatoon and in the Greater Toronto area were searched. 9 people from Manitoba, Ontario and the US have been arrested while warrants have been issued for 5 others. Zubina Ahmed, CBC News, Winnipeg.
An inquest judge says there's nothing Winnipeg police could have done to prevent the death of a man they killed during a domestic violence call. Jason Collins was shot by officers in April 2020. Police were responding to a call at a Winnipeg home where a woman reported she'd been assaulted by her boyfriend. When officers arrived, they heard someone screaming inside. They forced entry where they saw Collins holding a gun to his head. Now, cops retreated, but before they could implement a response plan, he came out pointing the gun at them. They shot and killed him. It was later determined he was holding a plastic BB gun. The judge says police acted appropriately. The City of Winnipeg unveiled a set of proposed zoning changes to increase housing density. It's part of the requirements for the city to receive millions in federal funding. They would allow up to 4 units on lots currently zoned for single-family houses and duplexes without a need for a public hearing. Mayor Scott Gillingham says the latest draft includes reduced height limits for fourplexes.
Well, I think what our staff has proposed reflects that they have heard feedback. They've tried to incorporate some feedback from councillors and members of the public as well, who wanted to see some changes from what was originally proposed before we get to the hearing.
A hearing on the proposed changes is expected in late spring. Let's bring in weather specialist Riley Lachak. And Riley, I said to you a little bit earlier, we're going on to a roller coaster that I'd like to get off of.
Yeah, buckle up, no refunds here. What you see is what you get for the next week at least here across the province. Temperatures today a little warmer than they were yesterday. We did get above the freezing mark really across much of the south today. Winnipeg, downtown actually getting to just over 2 degrees late this afternoon. One's back to the west and still some cold air into parts of northern Manitoba, -12 in Thompson, Churchill at -21 degrees. degrees. So tonight, looking at another chance of flurries overnight tonight in Winnipeg. The best chance the further south you are in the province. Northeast winds gusting up to 30 overnight. A few flurries into the morning. A cloudier day tomorrow. We're up to +1 with some sunny breaks again through the afternoon. So another very similar day, some peaks of sunshine. But I want to show you something that's brewing here, particularly off the Pacific coast of the United States. This is what I want to watch out for and what will be driving some of our incoming weather into Manitoba. Some rain, some snow, maybe some freezing rain, and maybe even some thunderstorms. All in the next few days. I'll explain, Brittany, when I come back in just a bit.
If you don't like the weather, just wait.
Oh,
eh?
yeah.
Thank you, Riley.
You're welcome.
We need to take a quick break, but we have more local news coming up. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. Stay with us. Manitoba's government has introduced a law that stops the practice of incarcerating people because they need health care. Uzoma Asagwara says if people need medical care, they shouldn't have to go to jail to get it. We're joined by the CBC's Ian Fraze live in our newsroom. So, Ian, bring us up to speed. What brought this issue to the government's attention?
Geraldine Mason has never been charged with a crime, yet she still spent a month in jail, all because she has tuberculosis and missed a couple doses of her medication. CBC's I-Team brought us this story a couple months ago. Right after it was published, the province signed a directive banning incarceration under the Public Health Act. Now the province wants it to be a law. Health Minister Uzoma Asagwara says the province is righting a wrong.
The reality of it is that in Manitoba, and not just Manitoba, the folks who have been disproportionately impacted by the previous iteration of this legislation are Indigenous peoples. That is unacceptable. We know there's a long-standing historical practice of incarcerating Indigenous peoples for healthcare reasons. That is a shameful part of our history.
Now, should this law pass, people with infectious diseases can still be detained, but only in a healthcare facility. The person that would have the final say on that would be a judge.
So, Ian, several months ago, the government promised to stop grocery stores from preventing competitors from opening up nearby. Now, we got details today on new legislation to do just that. But how big a problem is this that grocery stores can't open?
Munther Zaid, one of the co-owners of Food Fair, says there would be more Food Fair locations in Winnipeg without these property controls. Because right now, effectively, a store owner could draw a circle around their location and say, no one's allowed to open up here. This is what's called a restrictive covenant. And Manitoba now wants a law to ban this. But there's going to be a big loophole if the law does pass. These restrictions can continue so long as the owner registers their restrictive covenant within 180 days of amendments passing. But Mintu Sandhu is fine with this. He's the public service delivery minister. He says this law is good for consumers.
Our focus is opening up the market for more grocers, independent grocers to come and stabilize the grocery prices, hopefully lower those grocery prices.
So will this work? Will this lower grocery prices? Munther Zaid, who I spoke with a couple months ago, he was skeptical prices would fall much at all, saying all this would mean would be more stores fighting over the same pie. Brittany.
Ian, that's CBC's Ian Fraze. Via Rail has filed a lawsuit against the Forks. It's over land the rail company says it's had rights to use since a sale agreement reached nearly 40 years ago. The Forks is currently in talks regarding the parking lot space immediately behind Union Station. It's where work is set to begin on a planned housing development. Via claims in its suit that under a 1986 agreement, it was granted an easement giving the rail line the right to use the property. The Forks says it continues to work with Via to resolve the issue. Former Manitoba Progressive Conservative leadership candidate Shelley Glover says she's working to form a new Conservative party in Manitoba. She says the PCs can't shed the baggage from its refusal to search the Prairie Green landfill. CBC's Bartley Kivas reports.
Former Conservative MP Shelley Glover came within 373 votes of becoming PC leader and Manitoba Premier in 2021. She lost the race to Heather Stephenson and went to court to try to overturn the result. Nonetheless, Glover remained a party member until 2023, when she canceled her PC membership over the Stephenson government's refusal to search the Prairie Green landfill for the remains of murdered First Nations women. The PCs then ran election campaign ads promoting that decision. Interim party leader Wayne Owasco apologized for this last week.
Honorable Speaker, our government erred. It's as simple as that.
Glover says she was proud of Owasco, but then came comments from PC leadership candidate Abi Khan, who wouldn't call the refusal to search the landfill a mistake, and Wally Dowdridge, who said he would have sought corporate funding for the landfill search. Glover says she can't support either candidate and is now working on a new right-of-centre alternative to the PCs.
I do not believe that this party can recover. It certainly doesn't represent the Conservative principles, values, ethics that I hold dear, and I strongly believe that we should be moving forward under a different party name, a different leadership, and that's what I'm working towards.
Glover says she would not lead this party, nor will she seek elected office again. PC Party President Brent Poole says a new Conservative Party would only end up splitting the right-of-centre vote if it gets any traction at all. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A nonprofit that supports Manitobans with intellectual disabilities is expanding its headquarters. Direct Action in Support of Community Homes, or DASH, has been providing community programs and services for more than 50 years. Now it's able to move forward with renovations thanks to an $8 million injection from the feds. The money's going towards modernizing the interior, adding community spaces, improving accessibility, among other things. Riley. I've said it before. I said, yeah, distract, right? Look at his smile, Look at his eyes, because you might want to miss the forecast, at least in the longer term. For the next few days, it's not so bad.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of days of some above seasonal temperatures, Brittany, but then we really start to get under the influence of some Pacific moisture and throwing a little bit of Gulf moisture into that too, and we're in for a bit of a messy recipe for the weekend.
Just blame the West.
I know. We'll start big picture. Let's take a look at this first of all. So I want to draw your attention to the instability that you see, the precipitation in this red circle here off the coast of California. This is what's helping drive some of that rain that's been falling on parts of our west coast of Canada. Watch what happens, though, as we get through the next couple of days. This is why this is important on what we're going to see happening to our weather here. So you can see that kind of split off into a couple of systems here. This one develops over BC, crosses into Alberta. This is going to be a system that brings some snow to western parts of the province Friday into Saturday, and some accumulating snow even to the tune of 20 centimeters into parts of northern Manitoba. Then you've got this, and you can start to see a little bit of counterclockwise rotation here. This burst of energy is starting to form its own area of low pressure, aided in part by some of this Gulf moisture that's pulling up from the States here as well. And look at what happens as we get into Saturday. Those two combine over eastern Manitoba, northwestern Ontario. We'll take a closer look at this in a moment, but giving us some snow, some freezing rain, even the potential for an isolated thunderstorm as we head Friday night into Saturday for much of southern Manitoba as this works its way into northwestern Ontario. So overnight, we do see another little bit of instability riding along the jet stream. So again, places like Deloraine, Boissevain into Killarney looking at the potential for a few flurries. A chance of that in the Red River Valley. So again, maybe we pick up a dusting of snow. But then as we get into Friday, there's that first round of snow that moves into parts of northern Manitoba, the Parkland, Westman getting some of that. And as we head Friday night into Saturday, there's some of those pink colors indicating some mixing or some freezing rain overnight into Saturday morning before we get into more of a snow event for Winnipeg. So we'll take a look at this in the coming days as the track kind of finesses itself here and we get a little bit more certainty on what exactly is happening. But until Saturday morning, at least, looking at a couple of centimeters of snow across the south. But again, the potential for up to 25 centimeters of snow for parts of northern Manitoba. This area in yellow is what you're looking at, and the potential, at least for this red circle, for some freezing rain as we get into the day on Saturday morning, at least. So +1 tomorrow, +5, Brittany, for Friday, and then we're looking at temperatures really diving into the weekend again.
All right. Thank you, Riley.
You're welcome.
We've got much more to come after the break. Stay with us. We're back in just a few minutes.
Winkler and Morden, let's get to know each other a little bit better. CBC's Communities in Focus is coming to your communities March 17th to 21st. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for details.
Today, we are taking further decisive action by declaring a state of emergency in the province.
So from now on, gatherings of more than 50 people are banned in Manitoba. Bingos, gyms, and gaming centers must close.
Tina Kaler was 12 days away from turning 100 years old when she died.
She was a teacher, wife, and mother. She and her husband married and moved to Winnipeg in the 50s. The pair ran a grocery store and restaurant.
Ring says Deng was a committed family man, and he cared a lot for his community.
Glenn Alvin Bailey was in his 80s and full of life.
Hi kids, how you doing?
Always with a smile. Bailey says his dad touched so many lives through his years of community service.
But his greatest joy was his students.
He would call them my kids. Sometimes he'd buy students shoes or jackets in the winter.
I had to watch Marky's last breath on Zoom. No one should go through that.
Ronald Starzyk's family called him Ronnie. He was 62 years old when he died November 26th.
It's been 5 years since the COVID-19 pandemic changed life in Canada and around the globe. And on this day in 2020, Manitoba announced its first cases. The virus claimed more than 7 million lives worldwide. More than 60,000 people died in Canada, including more than 3,800 here in Manitoba to date. And while for many it feels like a distant memory, for some Manitobans, it reminds them of goodbyes they never got the chance to say. CBC's Felicia Adam has more.
So that's myself, my Granny Doreen, my Grandpa Joe.
It's family photos like these that help Justin Dusick remember his grandparents. The photos also a reminder of goodbyes he'll never have. In 2021, his grandparents, Joe and Doreen, died in hospital 11 days apart from COVID-19. At that time, pandemic rules restricted visitation in hospitals. A no-visitor policy meant people like Dusick and his family weren't able to see their loved ones.
My dad and his two brothers, they were allowed to be on a video call with my grandpa as he took his last breaths.
Dusick was at home when he got the news, a text message saying his Grandpa Joe had passed away, a memory that almost 4 years later still lingers.
My granny and grandpa could have been scared in the hospital on their own. They never got comfort in their final moments. Who knows what they wanted to say to us? Who knows if all they wanted was a hug?
It's a story heard across Canada.
What we saw was a fundamental breaking of people's hearts.
Laura Tamblin-Watts is the head of CanAge, a national advocacy organization for seniors. She says cases like Dusick's became common throughout the pandemic.
At best, you were blocked with a window in full personal protective equipment, trying to see your loved one through, knowing that it might be the last time.
5 years after the first cases of COVID-19, Tamblin-Watts says things could have been handled better. Rather than a blanket no visitation, rules could have focused on reducing risk through vaccinations, hand washing, and the use of personal protective equipment, something Dusick says his family didn't have the option of.
I think that's what makes it harder, is we would have dropped everything to go see that person regardless of the risk of infection, because that person means something to us in our lives.
Dusick and his family are trying to move on, but like others with the same experience, they still carry those times with them. Felicia Adam, CBC News, Winnipeg.
So now looking back, what did we learn about how we address the pandemic? One community health sciences professor says the pandemic exposed many shortfalls, including when it came to the province's public health communications. Recommendations were made based on what we knew at that point in time when it came to social distancing, masking, and lockdowns, but those evolved. She says making sure people have access to credible information they can understand is important.
People were not always tracking at the same time with some of the shifts because it just seemed so confusing. So I think we need to really do a better job of trying to make sure that we're trying to address why something has changed and repeating that a bit more often.
So also when it comes to vaccines, epidemiologist Cynthia Carr says the changing messaging about different kinds of vaccinations and efficacy needed to be better. She says when vaccinated people got COVID, it led to some believing the shots didn't work.
Tens of thousands of Canadians did die, unfortunately, from COVID, but many are here today because they were vaccinated. And although they may have gotten infected and they may have gotten sick, that vaccine gave your immune system enough information to get ready to fight.
For those living with long COVID, there are still lingering health effects. Doctors say that while most people's long COVID symptoms have improved or been resolved, others are still experiencing symptoms of brain fog, physical weakness, and shortness of breath. COVID changed life as we knew it for years, and in some cases that normal never returned. It changed people, families, relationships. It caused years of deep divide within our communities. Mennonite Church Manitoba is a community of 40 congregations with more than 6,000 members. Michael Paul is the executive minister and joins me now. Thanks for being here, Michael.
Glad to be here.
So Michael, what really stands out for you when you look back on the pandemic and how it impacted your community?
You know, I think about those divides that you mentioned. There have always been political and social differences among us, but I really feel like COVID and the pandemic restrictions that were put by public health really changed those differences into divides. And those divides have, in some cases, they've healed, but in some cases they haven't healed. I think in some cases those divides have morphed into broader political and social divides.
Yeah, we saw those deep divisions, especially in many areas of southern Manitoba. Can you give us some examples of where you're seeing those still existing and some relationships maybe that have healed and come back?
Sure. Well, down in Winkler, that area, I think that's where we probably have seen the most significant divides related to those differences over COVID protocols. And those, as I say, they've kind of morphed into wider political and social divides. And that's always challenging in smaller communities. You know, in Winnipeg and larger communities, we can go about our daily life and we can mingle with like-minded people. We can find those people and we can go through most of the rest of our life anonymously. But when you're in a smaller community, you can't do that because every aspect of your life, your work, your business, your church, your family, it's all intertwined. And everybody knows everybody and everybody knows everybody's views on things. And so when you've got those divides in smaller communities like that, it really is challenging. So I'd say that has been the most significant challenge for some of our folks, some of our congregations is in that particular area.
How have you helped people and families in those relationships mend and heal? How have we gotten better and gotten through to the other side?
Well, in cases where we have gotten through to the other side, I think in our congregations, our pastors have done a great job of walking with people and trying to bring people together. One of the things that we all have to do, not just in our particular congregations, but as a society, is we've got to relearn compassion. We've got to go back to empathy, being able to put ourselves in other people's shoes. That's a skill that kind of got lost or frayed a little bit, at least during those intense COVID times. And it's something that we need to recover. And that means in part being able to show compassion, not just to people who are like us, but people who are different from us, people who think differently. And that means as well, it means learning to really listen well to each other, listening not with condemnation, but with curiosity. That's something that I think when I see the places where there's been healing that's happened, it's been because we have leaned into compassion and empathy, and we have learned how to listen well, even still holding firmly to our principles on certain things, but still listening with that curiosity, I think is really, really important.
I love what you said about the compassion because, you know, we really saw that rise of misinformation and it fueled a lot of tensions around here. We've seen that trend really spread into many other areas. So where are you starting to see maybe those impacts creeping back right now?
Well, yeah, you know, I think the political climate that we're in right now, things that we are hearing south of the border, it feels like there's almost two different silos that people are getting their information from, their news information from. And, you know, we need to find ways to break through those silos, to really listen well to each other, and to find broader ways of hearing about the world around us as well. That's easier said than done, especially for folks who have been really siloed in a particular way. But we all are in danger of that. We all need to make sure that we're open-minded as much as we can be, and as you know, broadly informed as we can be.
I think it's an easy spot to end it there because you've mentioned the compassion and the empathy, and I think it's something that we could all use and lend a little bit more of right now. Michael, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
It's the sounds and lyrics that can help make up a great song. But for some people, it's not just about what they hear, but what they see when they listen to music. More on the mind's eye after the break. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. Stay with us. CBC News has learned Mark Carney will be sworn in as Prime Minister on Friday. Carney had indicated that the transition would be quick. He'll be sworn in with his new cabinet at Rideau Hall. It's widely expected that an election will be called before the March 24th date set for Parliament to return. G7 foreign ministers convene for a meeting tomorrow in Quebec. Today in Ireland, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was asked if Canada becoming a 51st U.S. state would be on the agenda. The answer was no.
Well, that's not what we're going to discuss at the G7, and that's not what we're going to be discussing in our trip here. So they're the host nation, and we have a lot of other things we work on together. We defend North America through NORAD and the airspace of our continent together. So not to mention the issues of Ukraine and other commonalities. So we're going to be focused in the G7 on all of those things. That's what the meeting is about. It is not a meeting about how we're going to take over Canada.
The Bank of Canada has once again lowered its benchmark interest rate, this time by a quarter point amid the ongoing trade war with the U.S. The key lending rate now sits at 2.75%, the lowest in almost 3 years. Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem says the Canadian economy started strong this year, but the on-again, off-again trade war with the U.S. is starting to weigh on the Canadian economy. Uncertainty has shaken business and consumer confidence. Macklem warned the economic damage could be severe, depending on how steep tariffs are and how long they're kept in place. The European Union is hitting back at Trump's tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, ratcheting up a global trade war. The world's biggest trading bloc announced retaliatory tariffs on American industrial and agricultural exports, everything from Harley-Davidson motorcycles to eggs and vegetables. The new duties, worth over $40 billion, will go into effect April 1st. EU officials say the countermeasures are aimed at products made in Republican-held states, but will also hit some blue states. The EU stands to lose up to 3.7 million tons of steel exports, with the U.S. being the second biggest export market for EU steel producers. U.S. military support has resumed a day after Ukrainian officials agreed to a 30-day ceasefire proposal at talks in Saudi Arabia yesterday. The Trump administration had suspended the flow of arms and intelligence to Ukraine in its fight against Russia. Ukraine signaled it was open to the ceasefire plan on the condition that Moscow also accept the terms. Russia says it's awaiting detailed information about the U.S.-backed plan. Previously, the Kremlin has opposed anything short of a permanent end to the conflict and has not accepted any concessions. Meanwhile, on the ground in Ukraine, Russian missiles have killed at least 5 people Wednesday. Riley's back now. Definitely chillier to start the mornings.
Yes.
We are getting nicer in the afternoon. So if you can get outside during the daytime, maybe for a little post-lunch walk, maybe the best time to do it.
The number of people that were out on their lunch breaks today that said, gee, it's nice outside today was quite a high number in our office today.
And then just wait.
Yeah, just give it a couple days. However, if you do happen to be outside tomorrow night, there is something to look up in the sky at, which I'll show you now. The blood worm moon, Thursday night into Friday. I think we have a fairly good chance of seeing this here in the Right River Valley. I think we'll clear out enough Thursday evening that we'll get a glimpse of this. So a couple things happening. First, the full moon in March is called the worm moon. There are a couple other names for it, but the worm moon is one of them, and that is named after the larvae that begin to emerge as they begin the spring process of growing into bugs and other species as we get into the spring months. So that's the worm moon. The blood moon is, we are looking at a lunar eclipse happening at 1:58 in the morning on Friday. Earth will get in between the sun and the moon, casting a bit of a shadow on the moon. So it will look red if you look up in the sky early Friday morning, but anytime Thursday night into Friday, we have a fairly good chance of seeing that, I think, here in the Red River Valley. I think we'll clear out just enough to get a glimpse of it. Roxy, I think, is eager for a good evening walk, maybe once spring rolls around a little bit warmer. Thanks, Lauren, for sending this picture, and keep your pet photos coming to talkback at cbc.ca. I love to see them all. So, I mean, a fairly seasonal start to the day tomorrow across much of southern Manitoba. Maybe a few flurries first thing in the morning. In Winnipeg, a slight chance. The best chance of that comes a little further to the south in places like Emerson, for example. By the time we get into the afternoon, up to 1 degree, some peaks of sunshine once again, and a little bit more clearing as we get into the evening hours. So that's why I think we do have a chance of seeing this moon once we get Thursday into Friday. Your overnight temperatures look like this: -6s, -7s into Westman, Melita, Morden, Emerson, Sprague. This is the best chance of seeing a few centimeters of snow overnight tonight. -11 in Dauphin, -14 in Swan River. Winds fairly light overnight. -27 in Thompson, -28 in Gillam. Partly cloudy skies into northern Manitoba. Really looking at temperatures tomorrow around -10 for much of northern Manitoba. I mean, this is an improvement over the past couple of days across the north. So enjoy a sunnier -12 through the afternoon hours tomorrow. In the south, here's that snow that skirts across in the morning hours. By the time we get to the afternoon, we do start to get a bit of clearing happening across southern Manitoba, but still into northwestern Ontario, a chance of some showers or flurries, Brittany, into the afternoon.
All right, thanks, Riley.
You're welcome.
Well, we know that many popular songs sound like and even get melodies stuck in our heads on occasion, but a Winnipeg artist has created a unique exhibit aimed to make you listen to music and see music a little bit differently. CBC community reporter Shannalee Vidal has more.
For people with synesthesia, they can experience multiple senses like sight and sound all at once. I'm Shannalee Vidal, and I'm here at the Creatory Gallery in Winnipeg. That's where artist Jan Rogers is showing people what the color of songs looks like to her.
This one is Toxic by Britney Spears, which is a very bright neon, borderline too much for me to listen to. It's actually almost hard to listen to just because there's these pieces of it that are a little bit spiky, but it's definitely a lot of pinks and this constant whirlwind. Synesthesia is a mixing of the senses. So every time I hear a song or a word or a sound in the back of my mind, or kind of the forefront of my mind, there's visual imagery as well as colors. And so the show is trying to capture some of that and share it with my audience so that they see sort of the tapestry of my brain and what I'm seeing pretty much 24/7. I base them on song titles because that's an easy way for people to sort of relate to what I'm doing and kind of can visualize it a little bit easier. So if you look through the songs, for example, the green images are a lot of classical pieces. The colorful ones that are behind me are a lot of alternative rock and roll songs. So there's a bit of a correlation to it, not 100%. Certain songs, when I'm painting them, I'm like, oh, that really looks different than what you would imagine. Okay, so they're totally different things. Fury Elise, so classical piece. Enter Sandman by Metallica. There's some really subtle transitions between the light greens and the blues and the purples, and it's almost like a galaxy. Likewise with this little one, it's blue, but then there's metallic sheen and there's some textures to it. So as you get close up, you get a really intimate view of what is going on the canvas. It's funny, the first time I hear a song is really interesting because I just don't know what it's going to unfold like in my brain. And it's very consistent. After I hear a song a couple times, it's pretty much the same pattern and the same colors. And then the images and shapes, like a chorus is going to come up several times usually in a song. And that's a place where I can grab certain patterns and shapes, sometimes textures as well. For this piece here, the song is The Less I Know The Better by Tame Impala. When I first listened to it, I was seeing these beautiful, vibrant rainbows in the background, which is what I've demonstrated, as well as some muted colors, but then also there was this overarching layer of I've described it as dripping, but like almost like pouring down of neon colors sort of merging with it. Each image that I paint is multi-layered. So I paint, sometimes I paint with the black light on and sometimes I paint with the black light off. So when I'm producing an image, you'll get the image that you see, but then as soon as you put the black light on, you'll get a second layer to it, which kind of translates into what it's like in my brain. There's these hidden elements.
Rogers hopes to put together a Spotify playlist with all of the 50-plus songs featured in the exhibit. But there are some genres, like country, that won't be part of it.
The songs that I dislike and the genres of music that I dislike are, for lack of a better term, they kind of are sharp and spiky and unpleasant to listen to because they are unpleasant to look at in my brain. They might be muddied colors, they might be unpleasant to say the shapes. So every image I look at, it's a part of the song that, for me, they make me happy.
Studies estimate that 4% of the population has synesthesia. You can catch Crossed Wires at the Cratery Gallery in Winnipeg through March 25th. Shanley Vidal, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Still ahead, she works for the city of Burnaby and has a very unique job. We'll meet Caprice next. Plus, Riley's back with our last check on our forecast. Stay with us.
All right, so we're looking at another similar day. Sure, +1, but this is what I really wanted to show you. Our sunset Thursday at 7:30 in the evening. We're getting close to 12 hours of daylight, so there's that. Northeast winds gusting up to 30 through the day tomorrow, so a bit of a breeze out there. +5 for Friday, then we see that chance of some freezing rain overnight into Saturday, changing into some light snow or some flurries in the morning. Our temperature at -8 through the afternoon on Saturday, -6, a mix of sun and clouds on Sunday, and we stay below seasonal as we get into next week. Maybe a few more flurries coming our way next Monday, and then we start to clear out by the time we get to the middle of the week. Well, she is a sharp-eyed, fast, and a menace for would-be thieves at a BC compost facility.
This hawk with a job is tasked with keeping other birds far, far away. Michelle Morton has our daily lift.
Majestic, sleek, and alert. This is Caprice the Hawk, and she has a very important job at the city of Burnaby. Last fall, we went to the Burnaby roosting spot where thousands of crows from across Metro Vancouver gather every evening. Well, that happens to be just down the street from the Eco Centre, where recycling and compost are periodically dropped off. Naturally, the birds are attracted to this giant lot filled with yummy garbage, and it's Caprice's job to keep them at bay.
We would be inundated with dive-bombing birds right now if we did not have the hawk here. And even when the hawk is just resting or is just present, is enough that you'll see virtually no birds.
Dare says the hordes of birds were a nuisance to the neighborhood, dropping compost items and, well, droppings all over the area. Laura Langford is Caprice's handler and best friend.
She is fierce, she's a warrioress, and she's a sweetheart.
Under Laura's supervision, Caprice patrols the center from Monday to Thursday. That's when compost is dropped off.
It's just disgusting and it's gross, but it's a free buffet and they love it.
The goal is not to prey on the local birds, but to keep them from descending on the scraps.
When I fly around, that makes them really nervous, you know.
And in return, Caprice gets plenty of treats and pets.
Michelle Gomez and Caprice the Hawk, CBC News, Burnaby.
Oh, I don't know if I'd want to hold it, but that is a hardworking hawk.
I hope that she's compensated well.
She does have a safety glove.
Yes.
Have a wonderful night. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Yeah, I'm not sure I'd want to hold it.
No.
I mean, I like the look of it.